Trying to take out the stuff that I need to do myself.
Okay, so since we don't have a chair yet, since it's the beginning of the year, the first thing we have to do is elect the officers. So the first one will be the chair, and how that works is board members just state who you want to nominate. And if you are chosen to be nominated, you can choose not to be nominated, and the board will choose somebody else, so.
And you can have more than one.
And you can have more than one person be nominated.
Just Reese probably chair, yeah.
Reese, do you want to
Janet?
keep the chairmanship?
Yeah, I'm not driven to be the chairman, and I appreciate you guys asking. Janet had asked me previously,
You want to keep it?
but I'm happy to do it,
Okay,
okay?
I vote for Reese.
Okay, so you
You
do,
have to nominate someone.
great,
I'll second that.
okay,
So I'll nominate Reese Perkins as chair. Planning board chair. Is that better?
You don't need a second.
right.
Yeah.
So it's a roll call vote, so. Do you want to vote on her motion?
You want us to go with this order?
Yes. Okay. I'm not used to doing this, so remember.
Yes, yes.
All right,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
great. And then Reese can take it from there with the vice chair.
Right, okay, thank you, Anya. So let's get the vice chair election out of the way. I do want to note that last year's vice chair, Ted Brush, who had some minor surgery, so he's not here this evening, did not want to be the vice chair again for 2025. So we can nominate anybody.
Nomination,
You have a nomination?
Mr. Hume,
Okay,
Mr. Hume, Kenny,
I'd rather decline, I'd like to nominate Jonathan Boucher.
okay.
I'll second that if I can.
You don't need a second.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great challenge, I think it'd be good to, follow you more closely in terms of like your notes and things like that. So I'd be flattered. Yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you for the thought.
I don't want to put anyone in a bad spot, but I was going to nominate Member Jonas. And so don't let that make anyone feel uncomfortable. And I, it's not that I wouldn't work with you either, Jonathan.
I think Jonas would be great,
So-
vice chair too.
Well, I think you would be great too.
I think we'd all do a good job.
There's 7 of us here, so let's do a roll call vote. Member Hayes?
Who are we voting on? Oh, one of the two?
Boucher or Jonas?
That's okay. Mr. Boucher.
Okay. Member Jonas?
Mr. Boucher.
Member Hume?
Mr. Boucher.
Member Basnet?
Mr. Boucher.
Nothing to this.
I'll vote for Member Jonas.
I vote for Member Jonas. Member King?
Well, thankfully, it's not a swing
It doesn't,
vote.
it doesn't matter.
Boucher.
Congratulations, Vice Chair Boucher.
Experience.
And so with the chair and vice chair positions out of the way, we'll get right down to business here. Good evening to everybody. Welcome to the planning board meeting of January 7th, 2025. My name is Reese Perkins. I am now the chairman of the board. And we appreciate all of you being here and your involvement in this process. Other board members, we've kind of gone through their names: Michael Basnet, Jonathan Boucher, Tricia Hayes, Ken Hume. Ken Hume is a former chair who's back with us again this year for a fresh start. Janet Jonas and alternate member Jennifer King. Now, Jennifer King is going to fill in for Ted Brush because he is out this evening, so she will vote and act like a regular member. Board members are volunteers from the Bangor community, and we appreciate their help and their willingness to volunteer and do this work. City staff members in attendance this evening to my right include Planning Officer Anya Collette, Assistant Solicitor Grace Innes, City Engineer Jefferson Davis, and Planning Analyst Brian Scannell. We also thank them for their work. They are really the people that get us to this point. So with that being said, we'll do old business first this evening, which includes meeting minutes from December 17th. I want to caution board members that if you weren't at the meeting, you will not vote. So we have Boucher, Hayes, Jonas, and Perkins that were here at the meeting. Are there any comments or concerns on the minutes from December 17th? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as they were presented in the packet. Member Jonas?
Chair, I move we accept the minutes for our meeting of December 17th, 2024 as presented.
Thank you. And I have a second from Member Hume. Thank you. Member Hume probably shouldn't second because you weren't there. So Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so we accept the meeting minutes for December 17th as they were presented. I can do the adoptions of findings and decision together, right, this evening? So we have 3 adoptions of finding and decision. The first is 308 Godfrey Boulevard, which, if you recall, was the antenna around the hotel by the airport project. 320 Beaumark Road, which were greenhouses and parking at a plant processing facility. And 57 Birchwood Avenue, which was minor utility work at the Penobscot Christian School. Any discussion or concerns on those issues? Again, it's just for the members that were here at that last meeting. If none, I'd take a motion on accepting the adoption and findings for those 3 projects. Member Jones?
Chair, I move we adopt the findings and decision for 308 Godfrey Boulevard, 320 Beaumark Road, and 57 Birchwood Avenue.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Hayes? Jonathan, you're just too slow.
He's so overwhelmed.
With a motion and a second, I do a roll call vote. Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so we have unanimous approval of the findings and decisions. So now I'll go through my introduction, just so we're all kind of on the same page where we're going from here. The planning board has 2 main roles. The first is we review amendments to the land development code, which typically include either changes to zoning districts or changes to text within the code. We do not have any of those on the agenda this evening, so I'll skip introducing that anymore. The second function that we have as a board is the regulatory authority for land development permits, commonly known as site plan review. Site plans are reviewed to ensure compliance with city code as to parking, driveways, stormwater management, lighting, landscaping, buffering, building location, environmental impacts, shoreline zoning, etc. We also ensure that the plan meets the dimensional requirements for the project zoning district. We review larger site plans that trigger site location development for the main DEP as well, under their requirements. Some uses are conditional uses that have specific conditions and requirements we use to review the project. There are 2 items on the agenda that fall into the land development permit category. Before we get started on those, I would just like to say that information on the city's codes and standards and the comprehensive plan can be found on the city's website. That is often very helpful for you. When the applicant is asked to present their project or proposal, they or their representative should come up to the podium right here in the center and give us a brief introduction. I mean, we have a packet of this information with us this evening, but just give us a brief introduction to the application. Once the presentation is made, the applicant should stay at the podium while we consider questions from the board members or staff members. And we would then, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead there a little bit. Once their presentation was made, the applicant may be seated. We will then open the floor to public comments. If there are any comments from the public, we ask that the person come to the podium and introduce themselves, say whether they are for or against the project. That is helpful. if you would present your thoughts based upon city codes and standards and the comprehensive plan. These are the primary documents that the board uses to make our decision. If you are on Zoom, please use the raised hand function, and we will bring you into the meeting and consider your information as well. All comments and discussions should remain respectful and considerate of all others, no matter their opinion. Once public comments are completed on that item, we will then close that item to public comment. The board will then deliberate on the proposal using the standards as applicable and act on the proposal. Standards will be read and voted separately as required. Once the standards are reviewed, a decision will be read and then voted on. Once a project you are interested in has been reviewed, feel free to leave the meeting. You don't have to stay, but please be respectfully quiet so as not to disturb further agenda items that we may be considering. So with that, the first land development permit application that we have this evening is a major site development for proposed construction of the new Dollar General retail store, consisting of 10,640 square feet. It's a single-story building with new paved entrance, drive, and incidental parking and utilities at a property located at 1171 Broadway. This is map block R40001-B in the General Commercial and Service District. The applicant owner is Broadway Holdings LLC. Now, before the applicant comes up, I would like the board to note that the staff has indicated the completeness of this application and that it is ready for board review. Fees have been documented and paid. The applicant's standing has been confirmed. Does the board have any questions on the completeness of the application, or does the board have any conflicts of interest that they want to bring up? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to accept completeness, and that you would find, if you wanted to read it, would be under the procedural background. Member Boucher, you're jumping at it now.
I move the application was deemed complete on January 7th, 2024. So that must be 2025.
Yeah, that's
Should be, yeah.
The applicant paid all applicable fees, see Exhibit 3, and the proposed project is a major site development.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Bazinet, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, unanimous approval of the completeness of the application. So with that having been done, I'd like the applicant's representative to come forward and give his presentation.
Hello, this is on. Thank you for the introduction. Ray Shelley Lazat from Artifacts, representing the applicant in this project. As Mr. Perkins noted, this is a proposed Dollar General store. It's about located next to Tractor Supply, which is, I'm sure everybody's familiar with Outer Broadway. 10,000, terribly small plan here, 10,640 square feet, single story, paved entrance. The site exists as an undeveloped paved site, has been that way for many, many years. So this is disturbing most of that and adding a building along the east property line closest to Tractor Supply. It will include 36 new parking spaces, all of which are located either right adjacent to the building or across from the small perpendicular parking lot right off the entrance. The entrance has one entrance and two exits. It's wide enough so that you can get a semi-tractor trailer truck in to deliver goods, and it will include new utilities. There are some there currently, but most of them will be disturbed when they dig up the lot. The entrance is to be located central to where the new loading area is going to be, which is a distance from the existing entrance. Right now, there's a curb cut that exists closest to Tractor Supply, but that's going to be closed and moved down further so that they're not just, coincidental with each other. Trying to think of other comments. We manage the stormwater, basically everything runs in the same direction it did previously. They'll be removing a bunch of pavement that is there now and revegetating that with grass, so it'll be a little bit more updated. And I guess that's about it. Have questions, anybody?
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Staff comments first? Board comments or questions of the applicant? Planning Officer Colette, do you want to discuss particularly the email with regard to the setbacks and the buffer issue that kind of came up today, so that is
Yep.
explained?
So there were some abutter comments, you all should have received those today. One of the main concerns was about buffering at the back of the property, because there is residential zoning along the back. There is a chapter in the code that when you have a commercial use like this, that you do increase the setback, and then you add in buffering along that lot line that is adjacent to the residential zone, which they've provided in their site plan. And then there were some requests for potentially adding additional evergreen trees. And I didn't bring the emails, so I don't know if you all have those, but there are limited things that you can do with permitted by right uses like this, because the main thing that you're looking for with these is whether they meet the code. So you can't really require conditions outside of what's in the code. But for the bee buffer, for example, you could require that they do subtype 2 instead of subtype 1, which requires a few more trees and shrubs. But, oh yeah, as far as hours of operation and noise and things like that, that does fall outside the code, so you couldn't exactly require that. And Shelley can also speak to that. I think the applicant maybe had some comments on that too. And then the other comment was on traffic, and the traffic concerns about traffic generated by this development. Again, I think that's something the applicant can respond to. And if you want advice of our city engineer too, you can answer those. So.
You mentioned the hours of operation, but I thought it was more of an issue of hours of
Right, sorry.
trash pickup.
Right, when the trash is picked up and deliveries are made. So that does fall outside what's in the code currently. I think the applicant did have some information. I think they're contracting out, so they don't really have control over when the trash is picked up. So that's another consideration.
Do you want to go ahead, Ms. Lazar?
Yes, I spoke to the applicant, and as far as the buffer is concerned, I do know that currently right now, the requirement on this, what we have proposed is for that 350-foot length, that there should be 4 deciduous, 11 evergreen, and 35 shrubs. And currently, it looks like most of it is deciduous. So they will be adding evergreen trees to meet the buffer as part of the construction. And that's why we note supplement, because you don't want to disturb the vegetation that's already there, and you use it to sort of add to whatever the buffer is there. So once the spring happens and we can document how much of the shrubs are actually growing in, and I'm not sure really how you quantify that because it's low shrub anyway. But I do expect that there will be the 11 evergreens minus a couple if they're in there that will be planted that meet the city's specs for what a buffer would be. So they have no problems with that. They're going to meet whatever the code is requiring. Concerning the trash pickup, they do contract, and they have a dumpster. They plan to have a dumpster that will probably be picked up every week or every couple of weeks, depending on the usage. And they don't really have control over when they do pick it up, but I don't imagine that they come 4 o'clock in the morning or anything, so, you know, I don't think they have control over that. Is there another
Concerns about traffic.
question? Oh, I did read over that letter. I mean, we did look at the traffic, you know, and there is a standard based on the use, generation of number of trips that you expect. And this is typical for this type of, to pull it up on my letter here, typical for this type of development. They anticipated 32 trips during the morning peak hour, 71 trips during the evening peak hour, and it's less than the 100 trips that would require a traffic permit from DOT. So, you know, it's probably you know, obviously you're going to notice an impact, you know, if you're frequently out there, that road is very busy. But it's not anticipated to cause a problem there. That road there is very wide, and there is a center two-way turn lane right now. I'm not sure if people are using it the way it's designed. I don't know, Jeff, maybe you could speak about that area more.
Yeah, the only thing is, so this is considered a variety store. So an IT trip generation, there's a section in that. So it's very different than a Walmart or a Hannaford. And then the 71 PM peak hour trips is the total. So that's enter and exit in. So you have to break that out. So it's really, you know, 36 and exit in, 35 enter in. So just if you didn't know that, it's not 71 and 71. No. Okay. So it's not, you know, the initial concern was the driveway close to Tractor Supply. They resolved that by pushing that down. So engineering has no problem with this development and trip generation. You know, Broadway is a busy road, but 71 trips in the peak hour is not going to impact that whole awful lot. So.
I was gonna say, you said that was 36 in and 36 out, and that's in.
Or 35 and 36, it's 71 peak hour.
Okay, so 35, 36, over an hour.
Yeah, that's PM peak hour. And I think, you know, it's when you exit, when you do trip generation in these type of stores, it's assumed 50-50 exiting, you know, you turning right, turning left. I think with this location of the Dollar General, during the PM peak hour, it's people heading out of town. So it's a drive-by business. It's not a destination business. So they're probably gonna drive down Broadway from in town, get their stuff at a Dollar General, and then turn right. So that's the easier movement on Broadway. I mean, that's just my initial reaction. I haven't done a study on that, but I would assume that's what this is.
Good.
Just from other Dollar Generals and stuff.
I will add, excuse me, that they do have right away to the two-way entrance at the Broadway, the shopping center that's right adjacent to that. So, I mean, this lot does extend all the way over to there, and that access will be retained. So if they do need to go out that way, if it becomes a problem, it's even further out. So I see they have a couple of options, and so maybe that will reduce the number of trips on that one intersection there.
Yep.
I mean, it's possible, but like I said, it's no study.
Okay, thank you. Board, any other questions or concerns? If not, I'll let Ms. Lizotte sit, and we'll go to public comments. So I open this item to public comment. And if anyone would like to come on up and speak, we'd be happy to hear from you. And I thought Julie might be first. Please introduce yourself. And
I'm Jean Jenkins, and my property abuts this, so this is gonna be my new view. We do have a lot of concerns. The dumpsters are emptied at 4 AM in the morning. They already are at Tractor Supply. We would like to request, I know we can't demand it because you just told me that, but we would like to request that they ask their contractors to please do dumpster deliveries and dumpster pickups as well as deliveries between the hours of 8 and 8, so we can sleep. Like, imagine a tractor trailer driving out back, or a dumpster truck. So that is our request. And we also request that they plant a lot more trees than, I don't know if you've seen the ones between Tractor Supply and this lot. There's like one evergreen that's kind of half dead, and then there's a few little bushes. And that's not a buffer to me, it doesn't do anything. So if we could really enforce the buffer zone and protect our property values in the neighborhood. I sell real estate, I would like to keep our values up in the neighborhood. We have some concern with people that it might bring to our neighborhood if they start gathering out back of the store and then headed towards our properties as well. So in the email, Colette, I think it was you had said that the survey was wrong and it should have said 25 feet on that buffer instead of 20 that it states, is that correct?
The setback, correct, and that's a good point. The board should request that the applicant change that on the plans, and they submit modified plans with the correction to the setback amount, so.
Okay. And can we also request them to close at 8 PM instead of 10 PM like their website already says? And I disagree with you, that's not a destination. I drive to Glenburn and go to that dollar store just to buy cards because they're really inexpensive. So I don't agree with that. But so I don't think it's a drive-by place. I think people drive to Dollar General and go shopping. And there's already 3 convenience stores right there, like within a short distance. So I don't even know why we need it to begin with, but I understand it's a commercial lot and we can do what they want according to the ordinance. So that's my concerns. We have a couple other neighbors that have joined me that would also like to say something as well.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Hi, I'm Gail Allard. My property is next to the Jenkins, somewhat behind the strip mall. The dumpsters are empty between 3 and 4:30 a.m. We're already there. So that's a problem, no matter what. Tractor Supply has an overhead speaker system they use whenever they are open. So 7 a.m. on a Sunday, we're listening. There's currently a pool hall in the strip mall that closes somewhere around 11. We listen to all of that. There's a camper parked beside the strip mall currently. We don't know who's in it, we don't know anything about it. So there's a lot of people and a lot of noise. These plans for these cars coming in and out, it's not safe driving out there. They pull into that suicide lane and pull in front of you. You're in your lane, they pull right through and go in. It takes 5 minutes to get out of Judson Heights onto Broadway when you're trying to go to work. People are coming up through Judson Heights and going out to the Burley Road to get around those lights. So even when you think you're gonna get a second to get yourself out, you can't because they're pulling in. It takes a very long time to get in and out of any of those spots already, and now we're gonna have more. I'm concerned about the lights. When the lighting on these buildings is on, it illuminates our yards. You can't sit out on your deck and enjoy it without a bright light. We all have pets. All the banging, all the noise makes our dogs bark. We have to bring them in. You know, I know it's commercial, but it's gonna bring a lot more noise to our property. And I just find it very concerning that we're gonna have to tolerate all of this. Just checking my list to make sure I have it all there. Oh, and there is a storm drain in the corner of the property, right at the corner where the Jenkins and my lot meets. And it pools up. We have ducks that swim around in it and so forth. So I really wanna know where this drainage is all gonna go. We already have pooling, so I don't know where you're gonna put all the drainage, and then you have all your, whatever you put down on your tar, and what you put down to keep people from slipping, falling, and so forth, that is coming into the water there, and then it's abutting our lawns. I have gardens. I worry about what else is gonna be dumped there as well. So, I really would like to see the drainage situation really looked at. I think the traffic situation really needs to be addressed, and the noise. And I'm not sure who we call to ask not to have dumpsters emptied at 3 AM. But, you know, the pool all getting out is super noisy at 11, and then you woken up at 3 because there's a dumpster. And now we're gonna have more tractor trailers in there 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, so. And when my family bought the home, that was a place to park trailers for the trailer parks. So it was quiet and nice, and it's frustrating to know this is coming, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I do have a cold. My name is Paul Secord. I don't live abutting the property. I live on the other side of the Jenkins. However, the same issues that they have extends out into the neighborhood. You can hear the dumpsters when they come and get them things. I was told, though, I think they changed the time when they come. They're supposed to come later, but I still hear them every now and then. One of my concerns is, and I've had a concern with Tractor Supply too, is pest problems. They have a rat problem down there in those Connex boxes because they store all the dog food and the cat food in there, and the rats get in there all the time. I've got a pipe that comes out of the back of my property that's full of rat pellets. So they're making their way into the neighborhood. I don't know if you've come across that problem there, see? One more dumpster is not what we need in that neighborhood. The other thing, how many of you here live within 500 feet of one of these dollar stores? Anybody?
Well, it's not, you can present, but it's not a question and answer.
All right, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Carry on.
Okay. The other problem I had too is, we've seen a dollar store down in the corner of Broadway and State Street that had a definite drug problem going on there at the time. Before the place burnt down, they rebuilt it. We certainly don't want that happening up in our end yet, in the neighborhood. And I don't see any benefit to this to us. Is it gonna lower our taxes? Certainly not, right? We're gonna still be paying more taxes to support something that's really not gonna benefit us and only hurt us. So the only issues that I have is pretty much that. And Mr. Ellis has a big lot up the street there that he can, right next to his house if he wants to build one, or put one up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your input.
I mean, it's already done too.
Oh, sorry.
My name's Adam Jenkins, Jean's husband. The only thing I wanted to specifically mention, you did talk about 2 levels of buffering with different numbers of trees, evergreens, et cetera. And you said currently at the lower, is there any way we can mandate that higher
The
level of
board
buffering?
decide that.
I think that would help at least with some of the, at least visual concerns, and maybe kind of demarcate the commercial from the residential areas and help perhaps address some of the concerns about property value and sight lines, and maybe give the rats a few trees to climb up as they come to our houses. That's the only specific thing I want to mention.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more. Told I should mention, is any consideration ever been given to putting a traffic light at the end of Judson Boulevard? Because as has been alluded to with several of the comments, getting out of Judson Boulevard onto Broadway, heading in town, is a challenge
a nightmare.
That's not the way to put it.
I think that was looked at a long time ago. I haven't looked at it recently. I think this has been brought up before, and I don't think in the past it met any warrants for a traffic light. So the way, we just can't put traffic lights wherever we want. We have to follow, there's regulations that we have to follow through the state and through MUTCD, and we have to meet those warrants to put traffic lights in. Again, I haven't done this study recently. It's something we can look at. We can talk with DOT.
Well, things are growing up Broadway,
Yep.
and I would
But again,
suggest that maybe it's time to look at it again.
It's just not traffic on Broadway, it's traffic at the intersection drive too, so.
Sure.
I can't give you an answer right now if it meets it or not, but it's something we can certainly look at.
I think it's getting to the point where that's probably appropriate to take another look at that and see if there's maybe a call for a traffic light there.
That might at least slow down the people that are coming screaming down Broadway and go through the red light.
Perhaps.
Went to the state.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Around to DOT.
Any other public comments? Seeing nobody else in the room raising a hand. Do we have anyone on Zoom? If we do, they would raise their hand function, and I don't see that. So I'm going to close the public comment. Ms. Lazat, would you care to address any of these issues that got brought up, or? I mean, I would particularly like to hear, if you wouldn't mind, some of what one of these neighbors asked about the drainage issue. Seems to me could be understood better if she had a look at the blueprints, which isn't going to happen here, but there's certainly blueprints available that you can find this information, and Ms. Lazat could probably even help you out some more. I think also the issue was brought up about lighting, so.
Yes, we'll address the lighting first, because that's an
Easy one.
There are no lights that are planned on the back of the building, so nothing would be facing the back of the building. We do intend to have them meet the ordinance, obviously. They have to be full cutoff, and I think we did submit the size and the height of the light. It's in the general notes. I'm not sure if those are intended to be with a photocell, so they come on at night. I don't know, but I can ask that. That is something that, might be helpful to know if it's there. There's one light on the east side of the building, and it's the one closest to the street. There's no lights for the remainder of the length of the building. So a couple things. I did want to mention the buffer that currently exists between Tractor Supply and this property is indeed not, it has not been kept up as a buffer. I think I did that development many years ago, and I'm not sure, what happened over time or what kind of buffer was required there. Because it's commercial next to commercial, there may not have been much of a buffer required. But I do know what you're saying. It doesn't look like there's much of a buffer in between the two. And so unfortunately, nothing that Tractor Supply does they can't control anything that Tractor Supply does, with their loudspeaker. I don't think they have any outside, there's no outside storage or anything, so I don't expect to see any kind of outside speaker used there. As far as the drainage is concerned, and I'm very familiar with the drainage that occurs in Judson Heights, because again, I've done a lot of the development out there in permits over the years. And what this area is that you're seeing, where it sort of ponds, is a combination of drainage coming from both Birch Hill Estates and all of the developed lots north of this in Judson Heights development. And a lot of that drainage just comes to this one location. That drainage is not on this property. It is on the adjacent abutters property. And there is a drainage pipe that goes from that back corner all the way to Broadway. I don't know anything about the size of that. I have no idea how old it is. I don't know if it's plugged. I mean, it would seem to me that it might be, but I do know that all of the drainage in Broadway is very shallow, it's very flat, and it doesn't have anywhere to go. So if it does pond, it's likely just because it's backed up. So in respect to what you're saying on this site development itself, your properties are uphill, so anything that runs off of this building or this parking lot is not going to impact your properties. It just doesn't work that way. There's nothing we're adding to make it, to force it to go that way. Everything will come down to what currently is sitting into a paved area right now. I think there's a couple of like sheds on it, and it's actually, looks like it's been stored for some construction materials temporarily. I'm not sure where those have come from. And you know, we submit a stormwater maintenance plan to the city, meeting the requirements of the stormwater ordinance, and that has to be reviewed every year to make sure that they're maintaining their pavement, that they're keeping any structures that they install here. We're not proposing any, but you know, if there was ever needed a catch basin or something, that would have to be watched to make sure that it doesn't get filled and doesn't work properly. Those are an annual reporting that has to be done to the city. So that's something that we have submitted, and it becomes part of the permit when everything is done. So I can answer any more specific questions, but in general, I mean, this is likely to make, you know, improve the drainage right now that's there on the front portion, because we're removing pavement.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. I want to hit on one more issue, I think, and maybe Planning Officer Kleck can help us out with this a little bit. So I think what we understand is that what the applicant has agreed to and what is on the blueprints right now is a type 1 buffer.
Right.
And if I may, just to clear up, because there's been some slight confusion here this evening and in the emails about setbacks and buffers. So setbacks is building to property line.
Correct.
Buffer is plantings done to buffer a neighboring property. That's a different thing. There are two different things. And so the setback is required to be 25. The blueprint says 20. So we're going to condition the application or condition the decision on it being changed to 25, which you're acceptable with that.
Yeah, it was just
Correct.
a mistake.
It was just a mistake. But getting back to the buffer of type 1 or a type 2, do we know what the difference specifically might be between a type 1 and a type 2?
It's really just a 5-foot difference in width. And then also, I believe it's 1 additional deciduous tree per 100 feet, 2 or 3 evergreen trees per 100 feet, and then 4 shrubs per 100 feet.
Can you say if that's acceptable to the applicant to go to a type 2?
They didn't have any problems amending the buffer to make it, you know, so that it's acceptable to the neighborhood. I don't know if that's a massive impact to them. And I know that what we're looking at doing is going out and making sure that there are in fact the appropriate amount of deciduous trees and shrubs currently. So, you know, I guess it's a matter of like 2 or 3 evergreen trees is the difference that I see. So I can't see that would be a big difference. But I will say that, you know, we are, the building itself and the use is almost 100 feet from the property line. So, I mean, adding the width doesn't really make any difference. I mean, we're significantly further than what the minimum is.
Okay, thank you. So just for our clarification here, how many 100 feet is there on that back line?
It's 315, yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Chair, could I ask a question?
Yes, Member King?
I was wondering in the back of where I see the 4-foot stone, does it say drip, I'm sorry. Is that edge, the drip edge, is that at an angle, or is it raised up enough where that nobody can drive around the back of that area? Is that blocked off where that, because there's quite a bit of pavement back there. I just wanted to know if coming through that side parking lot, if they're able to drive down through there, if they're coming back out the same direction. I'm just trying to think if there'd be any.
I'm just not sure.
You want to come over and look
I'm
at the
sorry.
drawing so that you can see, and then you'd have to go back to the
So right here with the
microphone
drip
to
edge, or right in this area, how the parking lot comes down here. Is there an elevation here where they can't drive down through in here?
There is a small drainage swale that will go, that sort of like goes both directions. So it's pavement, but it's really growing in on the old pavement, so it's not really something that you would want to drive on.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure to clarify for nuisance purposes.
Yeah, I don't see that being an issue as far as like driving there, and I know especially in the winter, that's probably gonna be where the snow goes.
Yeah, okay.
So, unlikely to drive there.
Thank you.
But that stone drip edge or stone shoulder is at grade level, essentially.
Okay.
Any other board member questions? Member
I
Jonas?
just have a question for Planning Officer Collette. When you say width difference between the type 1 and type 2 buffer, is that depth? Like, is that like the depth of the buffer, or is it the length of the buffer?
The depth. It doesn't really matter for this application. It matters more so when you have a tighter area between like the building and the property line.
Okay.
In this case, they have.
There's so much
9
space there,
feet.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. I will add in, this probably isn't going to swallow well for anyone, but I will add in some of what has been brought up this evening. We can have some effect on buffers and things like that, some of which it sounds like dumpster pickup is just not in our, that's not in our ballpark to do anything about. And often when we are faced with these sorts of things, the best thing is if good neighbors are good neighbors and your applicant works with these folks. For goodness sakes, I hear you. We all hear, if you live in the city, you hear dumpsters being picked up at all hours of the night. And it would be nice if you didn't get woken up by that. But I get that that needs to happen sometimes at night because there's traffic in the way. So anyway, you get my point. The other thing I think you didn't mention with regard to lighting that I think is important is, what do we call those? The downward?
Full cutoff.
Full cutoff, yeah, I guess you did say full cutoff, but to me, what I think of is it's a downward facing light, so it doesn't face up, it doesn't affect you the way older type lights used to.
Can I make a comment on that too?
Please.
So basically, any commercial development and public property too, full cutoff, downward facing lighting is supposed to be installed in the city. I don't know when the lighting on these other buildings were installed. I'd have to look at the code, but they may still fall under that ordinance even if they are old. So I would recommend if people are having an issue with that they talk to code enforcement about lighting trespass issues, so.
Excellent, thank you for bringing that up. That was the other thing that I was gonna kind of point out is that what we are considering this evening is this project. As much as Tractor Supply may be misbehaving, we really can't do much about that here with this group. But if you know of something that they're doing that they shouldn't be, going to the code enforcement office may get you some satisfaction. With all that being said, do board members have any more concerns or questions before we go to the standards? Because if not, I think we're ready to get to the standards. And it sounds like what we are going to do, besides what the standards say in your packet, is we are going to add a requirement of a type 2 buffer to Does planning officer Colette have a suggestion of where we might put that in? Should we just do that in the decision?
I think that you could put that in the district site development standards, or you could put it under item 4 and part 4 about landscaping. Either one would work, I think.
Okay,
And it, just to be clear, it's subtype 2 rather than type 2.
it's type,
Subtype 2. Subtype 2.
oh, subtype 2, thank you. So let's go with,
Chair, quick comment.
yes, member Basnet.
Hours of operation are way outside our scope, correct?
That's what I'm understanding.
For this, I mean, there are some land uses that we say, you know, they have to have these hours of operation. And for like a contract zone or conditional use, you could possibly add that in. But for this, you don't really have the purview to do that, so.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks for the question. So I'm gonna, getting back to the subtype 2, I'm gonna say we'll put that in part 4, number 4. This will add that as a condition. And the 25-foot setback,
What was the
planning
question?
officer Colette, should I just put that in the decision?
Yeah, I think you can just put that in the final.
Right, in the final decision?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so, board members, if we could go to the standards, unless anyone has any more comments or questions, we're looking at the requirements of the project to meet Articles 2 through 12 of the code, which is in your packet, Part 1. And I would look for a motion on item 1. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 7, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-33's requirements regarding filling, grading, and earth moving activities, and section 165-33.1's requirements regarding erosion and sediment control best practices.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Jonas, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Can I have a motion on item 2 of that section?
Sure.
Member Jonas?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, and 14, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-66, requiring transitional yard for the rear lot line of a lot in the general commercial and service district, GC&S, which abuts any residential district.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that one? Member Boucher, you were kind of raising your head there. Thank you. Your hand. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 3, please. Member Boucher?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 4, 7, and 14, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-72, requiring adequate parking spaces, including handicap accessible spaces, section 165-73 regarding parking area location setbacks, and screening, and section 165-74 regarding minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot design.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that one? Member Basnet? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Item 4. Do I have a motion on item 4? Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 4, and 14, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-76, requiring loading space, section 165-77 regarding the loading space size, and section 165-78 regarding general loading space requirements.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member Jonas? Thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 5. Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 4, and 9, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-79 and 80, requiring adequate connection to necessary utilities, including public water and sewer when possible, with the condition that the applicant sends the fixture count form to Bangor Water District and work with them as necessary on sizing the line and meter for the building.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that? Member King, thank you. Ms. Lazat, we didn't bring that up,
Yeah,
but
we didn't.
you're okay providing a fixture count?
Yes, I'm just waiting for it to get signed out of it.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you. So I have a motion and a second on item 5. Roll call vote on this item. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 6, please. Member Besnet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 4, and 14, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-81, requiring appropriate outdoor lighting.
Thank you. You have a second on this one? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 7. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 14, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, section 165-82, requiring adequate fire protection.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Besnet? Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 8. Member Boucher?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 10, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, section 165-83, requiring adequate electrical services.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Wow, it's everybody. Going member Hume because he's the new guy. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We have a motion on item 9. Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 4, 8, and 10, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm drainage.
Excellent, thank you. A second by Member Besnet. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 10? Member Boucher?
So Chair, the board finds that based on, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 4, and 10, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, section 165-85, and section 165-86, requiring submitting information of anticipated sanitary flow in compliance with sewer regulations.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one, Member King? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we have unanimous approval of Part 1, all items. So moving on to Part 2, this is a requirement that the project meets the district site development standards under Article 19. Can I have a motion on this particular item? Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 4, 7, and 14, the applicant satisfied section 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding height limits, building envelope standards, floor area ratio, impervious surface ratio, and buffer yards.
Thank you. Second, Member Boucher, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Moving on to Part 3, we had unanimous approval on Part 2. Part 3, the project is required to meet Section 165-102 of the Zone General Commercial and Service District. Can I have a motion on this item? Guys did it again. Member Besnet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on the findings made in parts 1 and 2 of section 4 of this document and based on exhibit 2, project meets the requirements of section 165-102B for permitted use within GC&S, General Commercial and Service District.
Thank you. Do I have a second for Member Jonas? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, unanimous approval of Part 3. So moving on to Part 4, requiring the project to meet Section 165, 114 of the Land Development Code standards. Motion on item 1, please. Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, and 10, the applicant satisfied the requirement of Land Development Code Section 165-114.b through c regarding the proposed parking and loading layout and the proposed access drives from the site to any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration, including the provision for safe pedestrian travel to all on-site uses.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet? Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Item 2?
Mr. Chair, you didn't capture my answer on that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Did I just skip you right from the start?
No, you got it, but I hadn't vocalized it.
Oh, okay. But it was affirmative. Okay, thank you.
Just for the record.
Unanimous approval of Part 4, Number 1. Moving on to item 2. Can I have a motion on item 2? Member Hume?
Yeah. Chair, the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 4, 7, 8, and 10, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code 165-114D requirements for preventing adverse effects from stormwater runoff and ensuring adequate capacity of stormwater collection systems to handle runoff from the development.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Item 3. Can I have a motion on item 3? Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 4, and 14, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114.e's requirements for outdoor lighting.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Can I have a motion on item 4? And this is the item where we're going to add in that the applicant will go with a subtype 2 buffer.
You might just want to say buffer yard B, subtype 2, just to be clear.
Say it again.
Subtype B?
Buffer yard B,
Oh,
subtype 2,
Buffer yard B,
Subtype
type 2, subtype 2.
correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody want to take that one on?
Member Boucher?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 4, and 14, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114F's requirements for landscaping, tree preservation, and species type with the condition that this project use buffer type B, subtype 2.
On the back line.
On the rear yard.
On the rear
Rear
yard.
yard, thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. Do I have a second on this one? Member Besnet, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Could I have a motion on item 5 of Part 4? Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, and 14, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114G's requirements for building location and setbacks.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Hume, thank you. And
Chair.
Chair,
Oh,
should we amend this to condition it on the approval, or the correction of the rear
So
buffer, rear
you
setback?
can, technically, the language is just to say the project meets the setback, which it does. They just need to show the
Fix it.
setback is correctly on the plan, but it's up to you.
it's going to be in the decision.
Okay.
Yep. So I have a motion.
Second.
Do I have a second? I crossed that I have a second. Yep, okay. And so roll call vote on this one. Wait, yeah, we didn't do the vote, did we, on this one yet?
No.
No, thank you. Threw me off. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of part 4, all 5 items with a condition added on item 4, which takes us to the decision. And the decision already has a condition with regard to the fixture count, and we're also going to add in a condition that the setback on the drawings for the rear yard, is it just the rear yard?
Just the rear yard.
Yep, be changed to 25 feet. So have a motion on this decision. Member Boucher.
Chair, I move the board finds that the project meets the requirements of the land development permit for a major site development and therefore grants the land development permit for the proposed project with the conditions that the applicant sends the fixture count for the form to the Bangor Water District and work with them as necessary on sizing the line and meter for the building, and based off the condition that the applicant update the project plan to list the 25-foot buffer, setback from the rear of the lot.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Jonas, and a roll call vote on the decision. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval on all items with the condition. So your permit is approved. As you know, the next step is to go to the code enforcement office. Hopefully we've satisfied you guys to some extent. I know it's not perfect and I see some shaking of heads. I'm sorry if it wasn't what we wanted for you, but we do the best we can with what we have. Thank you for coming.
When you need the plan revised,
Yes.
when do you have a timeline?
So it needs to be within 30 days of the decision. And so you'll have the 2 changes, the setback distance and then the buffer yard.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to the second item on the agenda at this point, which is a land development permit application for a major site development and conditional use for construction of a 47,600 square foot office building expansion with a 13-space parking lot and associated site improvements at the property located at 36 Pleasant Street, map lot 043-028 in the Waterfront Development District, and the applicant owner is Bangor Savings Bank. Before you come up, and I appreciate you being here, the staff has indicated completeness of this application and ready for the board's review. Fees are documented and paid. The applicant's standing is confirmed. Does the board have any concerns with these issues? Or any concerns with conflicts of interest? Seeing none, I would take a motion on the completeness of the application, which you can find in the procedural background for this project. Member Jones?
Chair, I move the board finds that the application was deemed complete on January 7th, 2025. The applicant paid all applicable fees as demonstrated in Exhibit 3, and that the proposed project is a major site development and conditional use.
Excellent, thank you. Do I have a second on that one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we have approval of the completeness of the application. And so we would go to the applicant's representative to come forward and give us a brief introduction to the project. It's quite a project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is David Latula, President of CJ Developers representing Bangor Savings. Also with me this evening is Dan Miller from TAC Architects, who you're all familiar with. He does a lot of great work in the city, and Abigail Latula representing CB Mahar, the engineer of record on this. Brief history on this. This is the third phase of their campus. They bought the Berry Dunn building probably 4 years ago. with the intent of just renovating like Barry Dunn, put some office spaces in it. We started looking at it and it was really a challenging building with today's code, the floor to ceilings, with HVAC, meeting life safety, meeting energy efficiency. We tried every which way to save this building, and it just like, every engineer's like, do we really have to? But you had an iconic building sitting on the waterfront, so we just couldn't tear it down. I mean, I read the newspaper and I see Portland Museum of Art, I say, it's a beautiful building, why do you have to tear it down? So after about 6 or 8 months, we've come up with the idea of building a temporary structure out between the building and the railroad, sandwiching that front facade so we can maintain it, then remove the rest of the building and build in. So when you're done, that whole new building will still have that iconic, I mean, technically it's not historic, but it's unique. And we've all seen it, you across the river, you see it. So, I mean, I give huge credit for Bangor Savings willing to spend the extra money to save it. So, and Dan and his team working some magic on trying to figure out how to do that. So we're real happy with that. The expansion of the building is a little bit to the north so that we can put the stair towers in, and a little bit to the front. The net increase, I think, in impervious area is like 200 feet. So it's less than half the size of this room. So that worked out good. They are adding one floor on the top to match 24 Hamlin, and they're putting all the mechanical equipment interior on the top floor above that. So it'll all be screened, so we don't have any HVAC units. The generator will be up on the roof, so you won't see it, you won't hear it. It'll all be screened up above. They are reducing the number of parking spaces down to 13. We're reducing one of the curb cuts. The Barry Dunn space had 2 curb cuts and are kind of funky. So we moved that to one side and making that. We're gonna redo the whole sidewalk. Jeff's been great explaining what's the right type of brick that we can be using, and so we're gonna be doing that. They are combining this building with 24 Hamlin. So that rubble wall in between, they will be making openings. So which really made this building function. So the ADA access, the truck access, deliveries, everything's gonna be through the circle of 24 Hamlin. Even the public access and all the employees. You're just gonna have a little service entrance to get to the side of the building. So everything's gonna be functioning there, and then the majority of all the parking is gonna come from the parking garage, which they had intended, so they built it large enough to do that. So really with 13 spaces, there's really no traffic associated with this project. On another good note, water, sewer, they've all signed off. We're gonna be upgrading the water that's coming in and the sewer line that's coming in. And then Jeff and the stormwater people have been great. It all flows down, and we couldn't figure out where do you get the water out, because you get the railroad. And we've been able to work with the city to find a pathway. So what they suggested is there's about 150 feet of old clay pipe on the city side of the railroad tracks. So at Bangor Savings cost, we're gonna replace that pipe with new pipe and connect that whole system in there. So at the end of the day, it's a win-win. It gives our stormwater a place to go, plus it corrects a 100-year problem, which is the right thing to do. We need one agreement from the city. We want to extend the sidewalk that they put in front of 24 Hamlin, so that any employee who's here, they can go down the stairway or the elevator and then walk and use the waterfront from there. But that's the intent there. Back in October, we had the historical review. The commission reviewed it. We got their approval. And from what I've read from Anja and her group, we've gotten all the sign-offs from all the different, we're not asking for any waivers, we're not asking for any variances, and we think we meet all the conditions. But they've been really helpful on communicating that. So that's what we have tonight, and we're excited about the project. And if things go well, they're looking to start this spring.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it's an exciting project. Thank you. Let's see if we have any staff comments, I guess, first on this.
I'll just comment on the 2 requested conditions. They do have to have an easement for the work in the city's right-of-way, which they've been working on. It just needs to be finalized, and then the deed reference for that added to the plans once it's recorded. So that's what that one condition is. And then also on just that they combine the lots that they show as combined on sheet C101 before they start work, so.
Thank you. And both of those are written currently into the decision right now, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Board members, any questions of the applicant? Member Jones?
I have a couple.
Please.
First question for you is, I know that this requires conditional permitting, is that right?
Conditional use.
Because of the height of the building that's proposed, what's the current height of the building? I couldn't figure out how to measure that on any of the
Yeah,
systems.
what we did is we brought it to match up pretty close to the adjacent building.
Right,
So the conditional use is anything under 100 feet, we're gonna be 65. I think we're in the 50 range, 50 to 52, in that range. So it's gonna be, do you know the exact?
Yeah, you're correct.
Come on up.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Just introduce yourself before you start. Yep.
Dan Miller from TAC Architectural Group, an architect. The building height, the existing building is roughly around 52 feet on the railroad side.
right.
It's a very deceiving building because it's really only like 24 feet on the Pleasant Street side.
Right.
So it's a challenging, because it's really 3 stories that is in the ground on half the building. So
And then the new proposed height is 65 feet?
it's just over 65 feet.
Okay. And that includes the mechanical work on the
Yeah,
top?
that's mostly the additional is for the mechanical to hide it up there.
Okay, great. And then secondly, well, first of all, I want to say also thank you and thanks Bangor Savings for figuring out how to save that facade.
Yes.
Because when I first saw that project, I'm like, they can't demo that facade, it's too beautiful. So thank you and thank them.
Yeah.
And then the final question is the stormwater work that's going to be done going to ensure that the stormwater and the sanitary are separate?
Yes.
Completely, yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Because I know we're trying to move that way.
Oh, no, it's required. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the right thing to do.
Absolutely, agree, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I could add on, question for planning officer Colette on the height. So I'm confused, what is it that's driving the height?
If the building is 65 feet or over, so the proposed building is
Just over.
65.
In the
Yeah.
waterfront district.
What's just?
I would have to go get the.
Yeah.
Are you talking 3 feet or?
Less than 10, so like
Okay.
less than 5, probably.
Okay, and you said that includes the screening that's on?
That's the screening, it's really to put the mechanical, we don't have room, or we don't want the mechanical equipment down in the public's view or
Sure.
in the parking lot. So
No.
putting it up there, but you need to screen it and you gotta
Right,
do it right and ventilate
Right.
it.
No, and you guys have done a good job, I agree. I think it's a fantastic project. I was concerned, because I've been in the condos that are next door,
Yep.
that by going higher, that's gonna block some of their light at certain times of the year. And so that brought my thoughts towards the same question that Member Jonas had with the height concern. But I'm not, if we're that close to the 65 feet requirement, sounds fairly close. It's over, I understand, but not by a whole lot. And that makes me feel a little bit better. I don't see anyone here tonight who's from
And
those
we've been in
condos.
touch with the condo, they know with the project, we told them it's gonna be a little disruptive, so
Yeah.
we've been communicating with them.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Board members, any other board members with questions on this project? No? If not, I'll open it up to public comments, just to see if we have any public comments, and then we can kind of go from there. So, I don't see anyone in the room, and we have one person on Zoom. Raise hand if you would like to make a comment on this project. If not, I'm going to close it to public comments. And seeing none, I close the public comments for this project. And so before we go to the motions on standards, board members have any other discussions, concerns, or anything we want to talk about before we get to the standards? And if not, let's get right to them. And I would start with part 1, which requires the projects to meet the articles of 2 through 12. The first item of part 1 is requirement that I'm sorry, it's for you guys to move. I was getting ahead of myself here. Can I have a motion on item 1 of part 1? Member Hume.
Chair, the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 7, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code 165-33's requirements regarding filling, grading, and earth moving activities, and 165-33.1's requirements regarding erosion and sediment control best practices.
Excellent, thank you. A second on that, Member Bazinet, roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 2, part 1. Member Jonas, you're up first.
Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, 19, 27, and 39, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-72 requiring adequate parking spaces, including handicap accessible spaces, Section 165-73 regarding parking area location, setbacks, and screening, and Section 165-74 regarding minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot design.
Thank you. A second on this one, Member Bazinet. Thank you. Roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. A motion on item 3, please. Member Bazinet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, 27, and 39, the applicant satisfies Land Development Code Section 165-76 requiring loading space, Section 165-77 requiring the loading space size, and Section 165-78 regarding general loading space requirements.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 4. Member King?
Chair, I moved the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, 21, 32, and 33, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-79 and 80, requiring adequate connection to necessary utilities, including public water and sewer when possible, with the condition,
Wait, this was erroneously added in, that was for previous projects, you don't need to add that.
what?
On the condition, you don't need to add that condition.
Okay.
That was for a different project.
Okay, so end with the condition.
No condition.
So just stop here.
Yes.
Okay, can I read it again?
Please.
Okay.
I think that would be better, yeah.
The board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, 21, 32, and 33, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-79 and 80, requiring adequate connection to necessary utilities, including public water and sewer when possible.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that one? Member Hume, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 5, please. Member Hayes?
The board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, 27, and 39, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-81 requiring appropriate outdoor lighting.
Thank you. Member Boucher, you want to go with a second on that one?
Yes.
You had your hand up at the same time. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 6, please. Member Bazinet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, 16, 2, 7, and 16, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-82 requiring adequate fire protection.
Thank you. Member Boucher, again, you had your hand up almost a
Second.
second. Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 7. Member Boucher, you got that one.
Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, and 39, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, Section 165-83, requiring adequate electrical services.
Thank you. Second on this one, Member King? Yep. And roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 8, please. Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 12 through 14, 19, 24, and 25, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm drainage.
Thank you. A second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Last item in part 1, item 9. Can I have a motion on this one? Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, 19, and 33, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-86, requiring compliance with sewer regulations.
Thank you.
Is there any need to add in the condition around the easement or the clay pipe, any of that? Or is that, no?
I don't think so for this.
Okay,
No.
thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Besnett, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of all 9 items of part 1. So moving on to part 2, which requires the project to meet the district site development standards under Article 19. Can I have a motion on this part 2? Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 9, 19, and 39, the applicant satisfied Section 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding height limits, building envelope standards, floor area ratio, impervious surface ratio, and buffer yards.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on part 2. Moving on to part 3, which requires the project to meet Section 165-94 of the Waterfront Development District Zone. Could I have a motion on this entire item? Member Hume?
The board finds that, Mr. Chair, the board finds that based on the findings made in parts 1 and 2 of section 4 of this document, and based on Exhibit 2, the project meets the requirements of 165-94B for conditional use within the waterfront development district. Subject to findings that the standards of Part 5 have been met, the board finds that the applicant has met the standards for a conditional use. The board also finds, based on the review of Exhibit 2 and 13, that the project meets the specific requirements for business or professional office building in excess of 65 feet.
Excellent, thank you. And just a reminder to Member Hume, be the new guy on the block.
Do it?
You move that the board finds. Just a reminder.
Thank you.
So it's all right, you're new, it's okay. Do I have a second on this one? Member Besnett, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Besnett.
Yes.
Member Boucher.
Yes.
Member Hayes.
Yes.
Member Hume.
Yes.
Member Jonas.
Yes.
Member King.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval on all, part 3. Moving on to part 4, which requires the project to meet the requirements of section 165-114, which is the land development standards. I need a motion on item 1. Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, 17, 27, and 39, the applicant satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code, Section 165-114B and B through C, regarding the proposed parking and loading layout of proposed access and the proposed access drives from the site to any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration, including the provision for safe pedestrian travel to all on-site uses.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Besnett, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 2. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, 12 through 14, 24, and 25, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114D's requirements for preventing adverse effects from stormwater runoff and ensuring adequate capacity of stormwater collection systems to handle runoff from the development.
Thank you. Second on this one, Member Jonas. Roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 3, Member Jonas.
Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 7, and 39, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114E's requirements for outdoor lighting.
Thank you. A second on this one. Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 4, part 4. Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 7, and 39, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, section 165-114G's requirements for building location and setbacks.
Thank you. A second on this item. Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of all items on part 4. Moving on to part 5, which requires the project to meet the criteria for a conditional use under section 165-9A. Motion on the first item of part 5. Member Hume?
Mr. Chair, I move that based on the findings made in parts 3 and 4 of section 4 of this document, as well as based on the review of exhibit 2 and 39, the board finds that the project meets the standards and use conditions of the district in which the property in question is located, and that there are not any variance requirements or other standards that would impede the granting of the permit.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Bazinet, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on the second item of part 5. Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds based on exhibits 2, 7, and 17, 2, 7, 17, and 19, that the project will not create unreasonable traffic congestion or hazardous conditions on contiguous or adjacent streets.
Thank you. A second on this item. Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Part 5, item 3. Motion on this one? Member Boucher?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds based on exhibits 2, 7, 16, 17, 32, 33, and 39, that the proper operation of the conditional use will be ensured by providing and maintaining adequate and appropriate utilities, fire protection, drainage, parking and loading, and other necessary site improvements.
Thank you. Second on this one? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Number 4, part 5. Do I have a motion on this one? Member Jonas?
Chair, I move the board finds, based on exhibits 2, 9, 10, and 22, that the proposed use, although not appropriate for every site in the zone, is appropriate for the location for which it is sought, because the proposed use will conform to the general physical development pattern of the immediate area as to architectural style, building bulk and extent, and intensity of site use.
Excellent, thank you. A second on this one, Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That's unanimous approval of all items of part 1 through part 5, which leads us to the decision. And so I would look for motion on the decision, and staff has included 2 conditions along with that decision.
Just a clarification, if you can, we have the acronyms for right-of-way as ROW and then PB for planning board, maybe just say those.
So we need to read ROW as right of way.
Yes.
Member King, would you like a motion? Give us a motion on it.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I move the board finds that the project meets the requirements for a land development permit for a major site development and conditional use, and therefore grants the land development permit for the proposed project with the condition that the lots be combined as shown on sheet C-101 in the plans, and the additional condition that the applicant record an easement from the city and approved by the city for the work in the city's right-of-way, and that once recorded, the deed reference be added on the plans as submitted to the planning office within 30 days of planning board approval.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Boucher, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Besnett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Hayes, yep.
Yes.
Member Hume?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, which gives us unanimous approval of all the standards and your decision with a couple of conditions on there, which I think you're aware of anyway. So your project is approved by us. Time to go forth to the code enforcement officer and begin construction. I appreciate your patience with the process this evening and getting it done.
Thank you. Compliments to the staff.
Yeah, they're great.
They do make great jobs.
I completely agree.
They really-
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So, moving on to other business. We have annual training.
Yes. I think I forgot to send that. Oh, do you have it up, Brian? Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I think all of you have seen this before, so it's really just going to be a review. Not much has changed, really. So we'll talk about your roles and responsibilities, the comprehensive plan, zoning, permitting, and then any questions that you have. So as you probably already know, your role and requirements on the membership and things like that are all established in Chapter 23. You have to have an associate member to help you meet quorum, which is 5 members out of the total of 8. And also, as you know, your membership requirements are really just to come to the meetings and review all the materials and then and review the standards and decide whether the applicant meets those standards. Your regulatory authority is outlined in the state, multiple state statutes, subdivision statute, statutes on the comprehensive plan, on zoning and things like that. However, you're not a legislative body since you don't make policy. That's what the city council does. You are technically quasi-judicial when you make decisions on things like conditional uses, but that's the extent of that. And then also you function as the planning committee for the comprehensive plan. So most of you know very well what our comprehensive plan entailed and all the work involved with that. The purpose of the comprehensive plan is to look at all aspects of the city, our demographics, what our land looks like in the city, you know, where special habitat is, farmland, housing, economic development, and things like that, and then tie it all together and come up with a vision for where we want to see all that in 10 years. And all those different things are very integrated. A lot of times people don't think that, you know, housing and jobs have anything to do with each other, but they really have a lot. And so we try to explain that to people. It's come up, you know, in our discussions about rewriting the land use code. When we talk about housing, people are like, well, we need to talk about jobs. But if people don't have a place to live, then they're not going to come here for a job. So that's a big talking point. And it also, the comprehensive plan determines, or doesn't determine, but it has input into our capital improvement plan. When the city goes to make a budget, they're supposed to look at the comprehensive plan. So it's a really important document. And also the state requires us to have one. And it also helps for if we're going to ask for funding for a particular project, if it's mentioned in the comprehensive plan, that's really helpful for us to get that funding. It's ideal for you all to be the planning committee for the comprehensive plan because you do see the permits that come through, you see the zone changes people are asking for, and you really see how all of this is playing out over time and you know, if we need to make any changes to our land use code. And so that whole process of the comprehensive plan typically takes a couple years. We did end up taking 2 years with ours, although the intent I think was to have it done in 1, but there's just so much involved with it. It's really hard to condense that. It involves a ton of outreach, especially for the visioning part of the plan. So we did, before we did a lecture series, we did listening sessions, surveys, pop-up events. We sent things out in the mail. And we're really trying to do a lot of that again for implementing the comprehensive plan and rewriting the land development code. Maybe not quite as extensive, but we're really trying to get as much feedback as possible before we embark on that process. So on that subject, we are in the midst of implementing the land use plan and updating the land development code. We've almost finished the initial public engagement part of that. We do have another event at Green Drinks next Tuesday where we're going to be talking to that group and getting their feedback. But for the most part, it's finished. And I will be developing a summary of the feedback we received, which I'll send to you all as well. I'm also taking it to the Business and Economic Development Committee, a meeting on, I think it's the 22nd, and just to give you a rundown of what people said. So, but the technical review report for the land development code should be coming out in the next few months. And then later on, we'll see various drafts of that. But it is really important to have our zoning and our land development code align with the comprehensive plan, because as you all have seen, we keep getting these zone changes where we're in this limbo period. And it's just, it's easier if we can do everything at once and do a wholesale change, but we're gonna have these zone changes. And so it is really important when you're deliberating on the zone changes or ordinance changes to make sure that they do align with the comprehensive plan. Because there has been case law before where municipalities have not aligned their zoning with their comprehensive plan, and then somebody asked for a zone change, especially if it's in a growth area, and it got rejected, and then the courts overturned that rejection because they said, well, it aligns with your comprehensive plan, so why did you reject it? So it's really important that we are paying attention to that when those decisions are made. But you can, if it becomes really obvious that maybe there's issues with the comprehensive plan and the land use plan, maybe that's not what people actually want, we can go back and change it, but it just has to go back through the same process that the original adoption went through, as far as a public hearing and giving people 30 days notice and things like that. And then when it comes to permitting, that's the implementation of the zoning, which is the implementation of the comprehensive plan. So that's really where we see things in the comprehensive plan play out over time. And so if, our zoning and our code is done right, we shouldn't see like a lot of complaints about a project, ideally. So if you're having like a lot of contentious permits that you're seeing, it's probably an indication that, that your zoning there isn't ideal. And maybe we need to look at that. So. I think I skipped that slide, but yeah, so as I was saying, zoning is the most crucial implementation of the comprehensive plan. And the process of us doing zone changes as far as notifying abutting property owners is really important, so that we're not just looking at the affected property, but we're looking at the neighborhood and making sure that we're not being hugely disruptive. But it's also important that we look at the change as far as the impact on the whole city as well. And so I do want to, speaking of that, kind of talk about spot zoning a little more, because that has come up a lot. And so, I believe we've talked about this before as far as case law. Dave brought up in the last meeting, I think, about some Maine case law, but various case law in various states have determined really that the two primary factors in determining whether something is illegal spot zoning is whether it complies with a comprehensive plan and whether it has a public benefit, so a community-wide benefit. There are some other considerations, like whether it has a disparate impact on adjacent property owners, like whether you're favoring one property owner over the surrounding ones and it's having a negative impact on them. However, the courts have said, if this change aligns with the comprehensive plan and if it provides that public benefit, that outweighs that if there's any disparate impacts. So deciding those things is really important, because if you do have a spot zoning challenge, the court may decide it's not illegal and it's valid if it complied with the comprehensive plan, if you determine that it complied with the comprehensive plan, and if there was a community-wide benefit. There has in the past also been some other considerations the courts have taken into account, like attributes of the lot, physical attributes like the size, and then the uses of surrounding properties. The actual use is not the zoning. But those two main factors are really what's considered for the most part. Then going on to contract zoning, we don't see that a lot, but it's really when somebody wants to go to a more intense zone, but it's really just, they're not making like a huge change. They're not doing something like that's way out of line with the surroundings. They might just want to have like a retail store, a very small scale one that's in a neighborhood or something like that. So contract zoning can basically put limits on the size of the operation, the hours of operation, and things like that. We can't limit uses with a contract zone, but you can limit dimensional controls and things like that. It goes through the same process as the regular zone change, but the legal department does typically draw up the contract, and then it gets recorded at the registry. So. All right, on permitting. Site plans, like permitted uses like we saw tonight, you're really just looking at whether they meet the code. You're assuming that use is allowed and that they meet the lot coverage and everything like that. You're not really looking at discretionary approval like with conditional use. With conditional use, you're looking at, yes, they meet all the code requirements, but is this also appropriate for this location? Does it fit in with the surroundings? What's the traffic impacts and things like that? If you decide that it doesn't fit, if it shouldn't be there, you do have to come up with a solid reason for why it doesn't. So, as far as subdivision, anytime that somebody creates 3 or more lots or 3 or more dwelling units, they have to have subdivision. There are some exemptions to that. But the state, I believe, is still considering legislation currently that would exempt that, 3 dwelling unit provision, because it really is it's making a barrier for creating housing, really. I think they're talking about 10 units or more requiring that, but I'm not positive on the status of that. But when we do look at subdivision, especially for when people are creating lots, we're more so looking at whether the roadway and the utilities are adequate, grading of the driveways, access to the lots. For just multi-units, we're typically doing more of a site plan analysis. But for all of these permits, there's a lot of staff review before it gets to you. We all have a plans review meeting with engineering, code, water, fire, sometimes sewer, depending on the size of the project. To look at all the different aspects of it. So, as far as the process, people are required to have a pre-application meeting with us, all the same departments. It's very basic. They can just come in with a concept plan, but that's just to give them an idea of the permitting requirements and feasibility of what they're trying to do and things like that. And then once they're ready to submit, they give their submission to us and we work with them, do our plans review and everything, and work through any revisions they have to make to make sure they are complying with the code. And we try to work through all of that before it gets to you. And then, as you know, we tell you all that on our staff memo. And then we also have to create the written decision with how they meet all the findings for how they meet all the standards, in case there is an appeal. It gives you something solid. If you do feel like you're going to vote no on a standard, you should discuss with everyone before making a motion. And if everyone agrees that they don't meet that standard, you should consider asking the applicant to come back with a change before just denying the permit. That gives them the opportunity to make that change and not have to go through the whole process over again.
Can I jump in just a sec?
Yeah.
That's why when we go through a land development permit, when we get to the public, you guys have an opportunity up front to ask questions of the applicant, but then when we get to the public, and the public has a chance to ask, questions or comments, afterwards, before I go to the standards, I was asking you guys, do you have any comments or anything you want to talk about now, before we go to the standards? That's why. Because it's really better to get that stuff cooked up and worked out before we go through the standards than spend much time going through standards or getting stuck in a standard when we're not really sure which way we're going to vote on it. If you don't like something, bring it up. We need to talk about it.
So if the end result is a change and everybody finds it acceptable, does the applicant have to repay the fees and whatnot to move forward? Or, 'cause
No.
I heard you had said that,
So if you're just asking them to come back at a later meeting with
Yeah.
changes, no. It would just be a continuation of the application.
Okay.
If you rejected it, they would have to reapply and pay fees.
okay.
And I do know, like, as far as placing conditions like we had tonight, if something's a little more cut and dry, you can talk about doing conditions. But I'm thinking of a situation like, if you wanted the applicant to maybe like redesign something, that would require them to go back to the drawing board a little bit and then come back to you. And then also as far as placing conditions, I kind of touched on that, but when you have a permitted use, you can't really put conditions that are outside of the code. You can place conditions that make sure they meet what's in the code, like we talked about the water district or, providing an easement or whatever. However, when you get to like conditional use, well, actually, I want to go back. If you did really want to ask for a condition on something else, you could, but the applicant would have to agree to it. But if there's a conditional use, since it's more discretionary, you could ask for a condition of something that goes kind of outside the basic code requirements. It would be ideal in that case to have the applicant agree, but they don't necessarily have to because it is conditional use. So, does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions on standards?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we vote all the standards acceptable, we should vote the decision acceptable. Is that correct?
Yes. That's what you've been doing, right? So.
It is what we've been doing.
Yeah.
I fear one day it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna vote no. Something, we can't, in essence, I'm saying, if we vote all the standards acceptable, we can't not vote the decision as approved.
Well, unless they've had a dissenting vote on one of the standards, one person.
Right, they could.
And then if they wanted to carry that
That's
thought
fine.
to the end,
Yeah,
this
Yeah.
is why I choose
yeah,
to disagree.
right.
Yeah.
But we couldn't have a situation where one person votes no on a standard, and then 3 people vote no on the decision,
Right.
Right. Yeah.
right? That would get us in trouble, I would think.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You'd have to follow the pathway of the thought
Yeah,
process.
Right.
I think that's important.
I agree with you.
Couple follow-up, related questions. If you voted no on one of the items, do you have to vote no on the decision? And that was an item, that was a discussion that
came
we've
up
had
once.
before.
Oh, and I
And it was deemed that you could vote yes on the decision even if you voted no on one of the standards.
Right.
I did. It seems like,
I did that once.
I can do that.
I did that
think you're
once.
putting an opinion in the ground,
Right.
as long as you can justify it,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Oh, yeah.
Right.
yep,
I don't want to DQ the entire project.
Right.
But here's what I disagree with.
right, yep,
sometimes in the course of, voting order, somebody makes a no vote and then they that's when and then they're asked to justify their no vote, and they make their justification, and then that could almost sway people. But they would have maybe already voted.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
Which is why I'd rather bring it up before we get to the standards.
And I was gonna point to what Anya was saying, where if you know you're gonna vote no, or you're thinking you're gonna vote no, then you should bring it up before voting is started on the standards. And then that's when you should be asked to present your reasoning. Yeah.
But if it's based on a standard, you can't jump ahead and go to that standard and discuss it at that point in time, right? Isn't that?
You can.
You can?
Sure.
Okay. So I would suggest as chair, you just, when we get to that point where you would want us to,
I do.
so you would kind of throw a couple of key words in there that get us to look a little further off the agenda.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about what I'm saying currently is, where is it here? Public comments. Before going to a motion on standards, this is what I say right now. Before going to motions on standards, do any board members have any issues they would like to bring up before the votes? That's my key.
There it is.
There it is. That's what I'm asking. You guys got some issues, let's talk about them now before we get to the standards. So, okay.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay, so again, process for site plans. If somebody's, we get a lot of people proposing to do like very small changes to a plan. In a lot of cases, those fall under a minor site plan revision, which is just staff review. But there are some triggers for when it goes to planning board, especially if they're significantly changing like the traffic flow or parking, or they're adding like a larger addition, things like that, it goes to planning board. You do technically in the code have the option to choose whether to make something a public hearing, but we typically always just make it a public hearing to avoid the situation of having 2 meetings for a project. It just makes things cleaner. And typically, once people submit an application, we have 10 to 20 days to review. It depends on the type of application. For regular site plans, it's 10. I think for subdivision, it's 20. But we don't typically need that long. It depends on the application. We give you all the staff review comments so you can see all the background work that was done and all the concerns. If you are unsure about certain things, if you have questions that can't be answered yet, you can, or you ask the applicant to come back with a change, you can continue it to a date certain, but it has to be a date certain, and there has to be a good reason to do that. And it is good to work with the applicant to get their agreement before you do that. We've already talked about if you're going to vote no on something, bringing up those issues. As far as SLOTA goes, site location of development, those are really just used for very large projects or modifications of current SLOTAs, which is mostly what we get. We don't see a lot of new ones. Oftentimes, staff have delegated authority from DEP to review those, but we always check with them just to make sure it's okay. They're typically good with us reviewing it, but there's sometimes that they want to review it on their own. I think projects at Husson and then sometimes solar projects they want to review. As far as impact fees, there's only one area in the city that we require impact fees for, and that's in the mall area. And those fees go into making traffic improvement fixes and then also bike ped infrastructure and things like that in that area. So for conditional uses, again, making sure that the site can support the use. Is it a good site for the use? You also have to look at some standards as far as general conditional use standards. They can't be requesting a variance from any of the basic zoning standards. They have to meet all those. They have to have a traffic study, making sure they don't have a very negative impact on traffic. And then also looking at what is the character of the buildings in the area. or the land use in the area, and does it fit in with that, within 500 feet of the property. As far as subdivision, again, that's creating 3 lots or 3 units. The state has a lot of their own criteria for subdivision. Impact on floodplains, do the soils support the subdivision, traffic. A lot of them overlap already with what we have in our code, but some of them go beyond that. So we have to look at that, and we also have to look at our own criteria. For minor, it's very simple, but for major, you get into things like right-of-way widths, lot frontage, open space requirements, and things like that. And if they are creating a road, engineering does have to review that too, especially if they're gonna make it a public way, because they're then creating city infrastructure. So we have to make sure that they meet our standards.
We also have standards on private streets too.
Yeah, right. I mean, like creating city streets, yeah. And subdivision really came into effect after World War II, because at the time, there were a lot of developers that were just coming in and creating lots and then not creating roads. And we actually still have some relics of those subdivisions that people don't have roads built. And so we're still dealing with that today. So the purpose of subdivision rules primarily is to make sure that people have access to their lots, and that they can get to them. For larger subdivisions, it is a 2-meeting process, preliminary and then final, and then minor is just 1. Sometimes very large subdivisions can also trigger SLOTA. That's it on that. And then just for the decisions, we always put the permit requirement reference, so what is requiring them to get the permit. We do a record of your vote, and then provide all the exhibits. We do the findings, and then the final decision, any conditions on the permit, and then just general permit requirements. We always put, they have 1 year to start a project and then 2 years to complete. They have to get a building permit. Sometimes they have to get other permits as well. And then for subdivision or plan group development, they typically always have to go to the registry to record that. And we do have a requirement in the code for that too. I think that was it. So, are there any questions? Okay.
Come on.
Very comprehensive.
It is. And I mean, we should know it anyway, but it's a complex process. You never know until the project hits you that you didn't imagine. No? Good? We all set with that?
Yeah. So the last item is discussion of any thoughts on the land development code.
Right. I mean, it's 9 o'clock. You guys don't have to suffer with any, thoughts on that, but we have committed to giving that as an option every meeting. So, and I actually had on here to invigorate you to have some discussion. I was going to bring up some projects that we've approved in the past, just to talk about where they are now, which I would like to do, but I don't really want to do it tonight where it's after 9. But I'm going to do that in the future. So if you guys don't have any questions, I'll just bring up the project and say, ask Anya to give us information on what's going on with that.
That would be great, because, well, one of the things I wanted to mention was, we took a lot of credit for all of the units we approved last year, but how many of them are actually under construction?
Yeah.
And, my mother asks me about that development out on Broadway, right there by the St. Joe's, every time we drive by it. So and that was approved long before I got on.
Yeah.
Still a clear lot.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah.
Still a clear lot. That's all it is, right?
We do actually show the status, and it gets updated quarterly on the housing progress page on the city's website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we try to maintain that. It is tough though, because like you said, we do have projects, they just don't get off the ground, unfortunately. But we do have quite a few that are currently under construction, so, yeah.
A lot of times they just go out and move around.
Well, that's what they do out there, is they just move dirt around a little bit and then, I mean, that's all I can tell that they're doing.
They still have
Lay
to
down
finish
here
it
for the
within a
bridge
certain period of
project.
time.
Is it really?
Which one?
Oh, is that what it is? Oh,
Which one is?
The lot. by
Across from
St. Joe.
KIT?
What's that?
Across from KIT?
Yeah,
Oh,
so the contractor for the bridge.
Okay.
project.
interesting. Well, now we know.
Yeah.
I thought it was supposed
They
to,
really are just moving dirt around up there.
so eventually they're gonna build
In
houses,
6 years.
units there.
Well, it changed ownership, didn't it?
It did change ownership.
Changed ownership.
Oh, did
So,
it?
probably not.
So it's coming back here anyway, if anything happens to it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
I also, if no one has anything else, wanted to let you guys know, the city council had, in part of their annual sort of training and review, decided to change the time of their meeting. They always met at 7:30, now they're meeting at 7, right, starting next meeting? The
I
next.
wasn't aware of that, actually, so.
Yeah, it is, it's true, right?
Great, good to know.
7:00.
Has it been approved yet?
I think so. If not,
I think it's the next one.
I think it's the next one they
The
approved.
next one starts at 7 instead of 7:30. I wanted to bring that up, and again, I think it's too late to bring that up now, but I would love to know if you all feel that we should try to meet at a different time. And I'm not suggesting it, I'm just saying, I think it's good to have that conversation. I don't remember whether we ever talked about that before,
It's
really.
always, as long as I can remember.
It's been 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And maybe 7 is fine, but you can kind of cook that in the back of your brain and think about it, and we'll talk about it at one of these meetings soon.
At 9 o'clock, I'd say, why don't we meet at 6:30?
And that, that might be worth it, so, so those are the other things that we were gonna
Maybe
talk
6.
about. Do you have anything else, Anya? Thank you all tonight, and we're done, what?
do we have to sign stuff?
We have to
Yes.
sign anything?
Subdivision plans.
I brought my
and
black pen this time.
findings. Great, black pens only.
How many documents?
What's they give you?
3 findings
that's what we-
and 2 subdivision plans.
2 subdivision plans and 3 findings have to be signed.
So,
In a case, right?
yes, from last week?
Yeah, it's a big case.
Oh, right, Anya.
I,
The three findings don't need signed by anyone except for those that were there.
Correct.
Okay, so, and nothing, no plans that this is all from last week.
I
I mean,